There are words we carry with us long after we've forgotten where we learned them. Nursery rhymes live in that strange space between memory and instinct. We don't remember being taught them. We simply know them. They surface unbidden while washing dishes, walking alone, or in those quiet moments before sleep. And though we left childhood behind years ago, the rhymes remain, soft and rhythmic, like something whispered in a language we once understood perfectly. Mary, Mary. Quite contrary is one of those rhymes. You probably know it. You might even be able to recite it right now without thinking, the words arriving in the same sing-song cadence they always have. It's short, it's simple, and for most of us, it means nothing at all, just a pleasant little verse about a woman and her garden. But perhaps it's worth hearing again, not as background noise or half-remembered melody, but as something said clearly, with attention. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells, and pretty maids, all in a row. That's it. 4 lines, 21 words. A question asked and answered. A garden described. Nothing alarming. Nothing that would make a parent hesitate before teaching it to a child. In fact, for generations, that's exactly what happened. The rhyme was printed in children's books, sung in nurseries, and recited in schoolyards. It became part of the great chorus of innocent things we say to children before they're old enough to ask what any of it means. And the image it conjures is gentle enough. A woman named Mary tends her garden. Someone asks how it grows, and she answers with a kind of proud specificity. Silver bells, perhaps flowers that shimmer in the light, cockle shells, maybe decorative borders or plants with shell-shaped blooms, and pretty maids all in a row, flowers standing neat and orderly, or perhaps young girls helping in the garden, arranged like a painting from a simpler time. It feels pastoral, quaint, English in that deep, rural way that suggests thatched cottages and kitchen gardens and long afternoons in the sun. There's no danger in it, no warning. Nothing that would make you pause mid-verse and wonder if you should continue. It's the kind of rhyme that exists to fill silence, to soothe, to teach rhythm and rhyme to children who are just learning that words can be playful. And yet, if you sit with it a moment longer, something begins to shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but like a door left slightly ajar in a house you thought was empty, there's a draft you didn't notice before. The word contrary stands out first. It's an odd choice for a garden rhyme, isn't it? Not clever Mary or gentle Mary or even busy Mary. Contrary, stubborn, oppositional, difficult. It's a word used to describe someone who refuses to do what's expected, someone at odds with the world around them. Why would a simple gardener be contrary? And then there's the question itself. How does your garden grow? It's asked as if there's something unusual about the way this particular garden grows, as if Mary's methods are strange, or suspect, or worth inquiring about. It's not what a lovely garden, it's a question that implies curiosity, maybe even suspicion. The answers she gives don't help. Silver bells, cockle shells, pretty maids all in a row. None of these are common flowers. In fact, they're not flowers at all, not in any horticultural sense. Silver bells might suggest the shape of a bloom, but it's an imprecise, almost decorative way to describe a plant. Cockle shells belong to the sea, not a garden. And pretty maids, if they're meant to be flowers, sound more like a nickname than a proper name, the kind of thing someone might call a plant they didn't quite know how to identify. It's all a bit vague, a bit off, and that phrase, all in a row, lingers in a way that's hard to shake. It suggests order, yes, but also arrangement. Things placed deliberately, things lined up. It's the kind of language you'd use to describe soldiers, or graves, or anything that's been organized by human hands rather than allowed to grow wild. The rhyme begins to feel less like a song about gardening and more like a song pretending to be about gardening. And once you notice that, other things begin to surface. The rhyme doesn't appear in the earliest collections of children's literature. It's not found in the lullabies and cradle songs that were clearly intended to calm infants or entertain toddlers. Instead, it shows up later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, already worn smooth by repetition, already embedded in oral tradition, which means it was being recited long before it was written down. And it was being recited by adults, not children. Nursery rhymes, we're told, are for children, but that's not quite true. Many of them were never written for children at all. They were written for adults, or more accurately, they weren't written at all. They were spoken, whispered, passed along in taverns and markets and fields. They survived because they were memorable, because they rhymed, because they could be taught and repeated without needing to be explained. And very often, they survived because they said things that couldn't be said any other way. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, maybe one of those rhymes. not a song about flowers, but a song about something else entirely, something that needed to be remembered, but couldn't be said directly, something that had to be encoded in bells and shells and rows of silent figures, something that, even now, we're still repeating without quite knowing why. The rhyme about Mary and her garden did not appear out of nowhere. It belongs to a much older tradition, one that stretches across Europe and back through centuries of upheaval, violence, and survival. A tradition of saying dangerous things in safe-sounding ways. Folk verses have always done this. They've always carried more than they appear to carry. A song about roses might be about plague. A lullaby about falling might be about execution. A counting rhyme might encode the names of traitors or martyrs, preserved in rhythm so they wouldn't be forgotten. This is not unique to England. It's not even unique to nursery rhymes. Across Europe, you find the same pattern. Innocent verses that, when examined closely, reveal something much darker underneath. In France, songs about bridges and dancing concealed references to religious purges. In Germany, rhymes about animals encoded political allegiances during the 30 Years' War. In Scotland and Ireland, ballads that sounded like love songs were actually rebel songs, designed to be sung openly without attracting the attention of soldiers or informants. The structure is always the same: a simple surface, a hidden depth, and Mary, quite contrary, fits that pattern perfectly. The question, of course, is which Mary the rhyme is actually about. Some folklorists believe the rhyme refers to Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic monarch in a Protestant land, whose reign ended in imprisonment and execution. Others point to Mary I of England, known to history as Bloody Mary, whose brief and brutal attempt to restore Catholicism to England left hundreds dead and the country fractured. Both Marys were contrary in the most literal sense. Both defied the religious and political expectations of their time. Both were seen as dangerous, stubborn, and unwilling to compromise. And both left behind legacies soaked in blood. Mary III, in particular, appears to fit the rhyme's imagery with unsettling precision. She ruled England from 1553 to 1558, just 5 years, but long enough to reverse her father's Protestant reforms and return the country to Roman Catholicism. It was not a gentle restoration. It was enforced through persecution, imprisonment, and execution. Nearly 300 Protestants were burned at the stake during her reign, many of them ordinary people whose only crime was refusing to renounce their faith. The burnings were public, they were meant to be seen, and they were remembered. In the decades that followed, Protestant England did not forget. The martyrs were catalogued, their deaths recorded in books like Foxe's Acts and Monuments, which circulated widely and became a kind of sacred text for those who saw Mary's reign as a time of terror. But books could be burned, records could be destroyed. Memory, however, could be hidden in plain sight. It's possible that Mary, quite contrary, was one way that memory was preserved. The garden, some scholars suggest, may not be a garden at all. It may represent England itself, a kingdom Mary was trying to cultivate according to her own vision, forcing it to grow in ways it resisted. She was contrary because she refused to accept the Protestant direction her father and brother had taken. She wanted England to return to the old faith, to grow the way it had before the Reformation. And the way she made it grow, the instruments she used, might be hidden in the very objects the rhyme describes. Silver bells, some believe, were not flowers but torture devices. During the Inquisition and religious persecutions across Europe, thumbscrews and other instruments of coercion were sometimes called by softer names. Silver bells could refer to the implements used to extract confessions, or to the bells rung during Catholic Mass, which Mary reinstated across the country by force. Cockle shells, in turn, might represent Catholic pilgrimage. The cockle shell was the symbol of St. James, worn by pilgrims traveling to his shrine in Spain. Under Mary, Catholic symbols and practices returned to England after years of suppression. To her supporters, it was a restoration. To her enemies, it was an invasion, foreign symbols forced back into a land that had tried to leave them behind. And the pretty maids all in a row? Some scholars suggest these were not flowers at all, but a reference to execution. The phrase has been interpreted as referring to the guillotine-like devices used in some executions, or more grimly, to the rows of people led to the stake during Mary's reign. Pretty maids, young, innocent, aligned in order awaiting their deaths. It's a chilling reading, and it's impossible to prove, but it's also impossible to ignore how well it fits. The rhyme would have been spoken quietly, passed from person to person in a country where saying the wrong thing could cost you your life. It would have been a way to remember what had happened without saying it outright. A way to encode grief, anger, and fear into something that could be sung without consequence. Other interpretations exist, of course. Some folklorists point to Mary, Queen of Scots instead, whose reign was equally troubled and whose garden at Holyrood Palace was well known. Others suggest the rhyme is older still, tracing it to pre-Reformation Catholic imagery that survived in folk tradition long after its original meaning was forgotten. The truth is, we may never know which Mary the rhyme was about or if it was about any specific Mary at all. But what's clear is this: the rhyme was never innocent. It belongs to a tradition of verses that say one thing and mean another, a tradition born out of necessity, out of the need to remember what could not be safely recorded. In times of persecution, when speaking plainly meant death, people found other ways to preserve their stories. They hid them in songs, they disguised them in rhymes. They made them sound harmless so they could survive, and survive they did. Across Europe, these encoded verses outlasted the regimes that made them necessary. They were taught to children who didn't understand them. They were sung in schoolyards and nurseries, stripped of their original context, but still carrying the weight of what they once meant. Mary, Mary, quite contrary is one of those verses. It may have begun as a way to remember a queen, a reign, or a time of violence, but it endured because it could be repeated safely, because it sounded innocent enough to escape suspicion. And now, centuries later, we still repeat it unaware that we may be reciting a memory of something we were never meant to forget. Chapter 3. The Hidden Meaning. Full cinematic documentary Chapter 1. 1,089 words. To understand what Mary, quite contrary meant, you have to imagine what it was like to live in a country where belief could get you killed. This was England in the mid-16th century, a place where the religion you were born into might not be the religion you were allowed to practice by the time you reached adulthood, where the faith your parents taught you could become illegal overnight, where attending the wrong church, saying the wrong prayer, or possessing the wrong book could lead to interrogation, imprisonment, or death. It was a time of fracture. Under Henry VIII, England had broken from Rome and established the Church of England. Monasteries were dissolved, Catholic rituals were suppressed. The old faith, which had shaped English life for 1,000 years, was dismantled piece by piece. When Henry died, his son Edward VI pushed the country even further toward Protestantism, stripping churches of their altars, images, and Latin prayers. And then, in 1553, Mary I took the throne, and everything reversed. Mary was Catholic, deeply, unshakably Catholic. She believed England's break from Rome had been a sin, a wound that needed to be healed no matter the cost. So she set about healing it the only way she knew how, through force. Catholic Mass was reinstated. Protestant clergy were removed. Those who refused to convert were given a choice: recant or burn. Hundreds chose to burn. For those who lived through it, this was not ancient history. It was immediate. It was personal. It was the kind of trauma that reshapes a society, that leaves marks on the people who survive it. And in a world where speaking openly about such things could bring suspicion or worse, the safest way to remember was to hide the memory in plain sight. The garden in the rhyme may have been one such hiding place. On the surface, it's just a garden, a simple, domestic image that anyone could picture. But in the context of Mary's reign, it takes on a different meaning. The garden might represent England itself, a kingdom Mary was trying to cultivate, to reshape according to her vision. She wanted it to grow Catholic, to bloom with the old faith restored. But the question asked in the rhyme is telling. How does your garden grow? Not what a beautiful garden, but how. It's a question that implies method, means. It asks what tools were used, what techniques were applied, and the answer Mary gives, silver bells, cockle shells, pretty maids all in a row, may have been a way of naming exactly how she made England grow the way she wanted. Silver bells, some scholars believe, could refer to instruments of torture. During periods of religious persecution, those who refused to recant were often subjected to interrogation and physical coercion. Devices with euphemistic names were used: thumbscrews, racks, branks. It's possible that silver bells was a kind of coded reference, a way of alluding to these instruments without naming them directly. To call them bells made them sound harmless, even decorative, while still pointing toward the suffering they represented. Others suggest silver bells might refer to the Sanctus bells used in Catholic Mass, small bells rung during the consecration of the Eucharist. Under Protestant rule, these bells had been silenced. Under Mary, they rang again in every church, a sound that signaled the return of the old faith. To Catholics, it was a sound of restoration. To Protestants, it may have felt like an invasion, a return to something they had hoped was gone forever. Either way, the bells were not innocent. Cockle shells carry a similarly double meaning. The cockle shell was the emblem of St. James of Compostela, worn by pilgrims who travelled to his shrine in Spain. For centuries, these shells had been symbols of Catholic devotion. When England turned Protestant, such symbols were discouraged, even forbidden. But under Mary, Catholic pilgrimage was restored, shrines reopened, saints were venerated again. For those who remembered the old ways, the cockle shell represented a return to tradition. But for those who had embraced the Protestant reforms, it was a symbol of something alien being forced back into their lives: foreign rituals, foreign loyalties, foreign faith. The cockle shell was not neutral. It was a declaration. And then there are the pretty maids, all in a row. This is perhaps the most haunting image in the rhyme. Some interpretations suggest the maids represent a type of flower, perhaps referring to the small, bell-shaped blooms that grow in neat lines. But others hear something darker in the phrase. The word maid can mean a young woman, but it can also mean a maiden, someone unmarried, someone young, someone innocent. And the phrase all in a row suggests arrangement, order, bodies lined up. During Mary's reign, executions were not hidden. They were public events, meant to serve as both punishment and warning. Those condemned to burn were often led to the stake in groups, arranged in rows, their deaths witnessed by crowds. The phrase pretty maids could be a way of referring to these victims young, innocent, aligned in death. Or it might refer to the guillotine-like devices, sometimes called maidens in certain regions, used for execution in a manner that was swift but brutal. The imagery of maids in a row could evoke the mechanical, orderly nature of state-sanctioned death. For those who whispered this rhyme in the years after Mary's reign, these symbols would not have been abstract. They would have been lived experiences, memories of neighbours who vanished, of public burnings, of enforced conversions, of fear that settled over communities like frost. The rhyme allowed people to remember without naming, to encode what had happened in a form that could survive scrutiny. A garden wasn't seditious. Bells and shells and maids could mean anything. But for those who knew, the meaning was clear. This was not a song about horticulture. It was a song about power, and what happens when power is used to force belief. It was about a queen who tried to make a country grow the way she wanted, regardless of what that country had become. It was about the tools she used, symbolic and literal, and the people who suffered because of them. The rhyme gave shape to something that was otherwise too large, too painful, too dangerous to speak about openly, and so it survived. Not because it was clever, but because it was necessary, because it said what needed to be said in the only way it could be said, and because, even stripped of its original meaning, it still carries the weight of what it once held. There is a question that lingers at the end of all this, not which Mary the rhyme was about, or what the garden truly meant, but something simpler and stranger. Why did this particular verse survive? Thousands of rhymes were spoken in 16th century England. Thousands of songs, verses, and coded sayings circulated through taverns, markets, and homes. Most of them are gone now, lost to time, to silence, to the simple fact that no one bothered to remember them. But Mary, quite contrary, endured. It outlasted the reign it may have been describing. It survived the centuries that followed, passing from generation to generation until it became so familiar that no one questioned it anymore. It was printed in children's books. It was taught in nurseries. It became one of those things that simply exists, like a stone worn smooth by water still there, but with its edges softened, its original shape almost forgotten. And perhaps that's exactly why it survived, because it was soft enough to seem harmless. The rhyme never named what it was talking about. It never accused. It never demanded justice or called for remembrance in any explicit way. It simply asked a question and offered an answer: a garden, some bells, some shells, some maids. Nothing that would draw suspicion. Nothing that would make a parent stop mid-verse and wonder if they should be teaching it to their child. It balanced innocence and memory in a way that very few things can. On one level, it was exactly what it appeared to be. A simple nursery rhyme with pleasant images and a steady rhythm. A child could sing it without understanding it. A parent could teach it without explaining it. It asked nothing of the listener except that they repeat it. But on another level, hidden beneath the surface, carried in the symbols and the structure, it was something else entirely. A memory, a warning, a way of preserving what could not be safely said. This is what human beings do when they cannot speak plainly. They hide meaning in metaphor. They encode grief in rhythm. They take the things that are too dangerous, too painful, or too important to forget, and they shape them into forms that can survive. Folk songs do this. Fairy tales do this. Myths do this. And nursery rhymes do this too. Mary, quite contrary, may have begun as a way for people to remember a time of religious persecution, a time when belief was enforced through violence and fear. But it didn't survive because it was historically accurate. It survived because it was emotionally true, because it captured something real about power, resistance, and the cost of trying to force a country to grow in a particular direction, and because it could mean different things to different people. For those who lived through Mary I's reign, the rhyme might have been a quiet act of defiance, a way of remembering what had been done without risking accusation. For their children, it might have been a story they didn't fully understand but repeated anyway, sensing that it mattered. For later generations, it became detached from its origins entirely, just another verse in the great catalogue of rhymes that children learn. But even stripped of its original context, the rhyme retained a kind of weight. There's something unsettling about it, even now. Something in the word contrary, in the question, how does your garden grow, in the image of bells and shells and maids arranged in rows. It doesn't feel quite innocent, even if you don't know why. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the rhyme survived precisely because it could carry meaning without insisting on it. It could be taught to children without explanation. It could be repeated across centuries without needing to be understood. And yet, for those who knew or who sensed that there was something more beneath the surface, the rhyme remained a way of holding onto a truth that might otherwise be lost. Every time a child recites Mary, Mary, quite contrary, they are repeating words that may have been shaped by fear, by faith, by survival. They are speaking a language they don't know they're speaking. And they are participating in a kind of cultural memory that doesn't require conscious understanding to function. The rhyme has become part of the collective inheritance of English-speaking children, passed down not because anyone decided it was important, but because it was repeated often enough to become permanent. This is how memory survives when it cannot be recorded safely. It hides in plain sight. It becomes routine. It sounds harmless enough that no one thinks to question it, and yet it carries within it the traces of something older, something darker, something that once mattered deeply to the people who first spoke it. We may never know for certain which Mary the rhyme was about. We may never know if the garden was England, or if the bells were torture devices, or if the maids were victims of execution. We may never know if the rhyme was an act of Protestant resistance, or Catholic grief, or something else entirely. But we do know this: the rhyme was not written for children. It was written for adults who needed to remember something they couldn't say aloud. And it was preserved by being taught to children, who repeated it without knowing why, who passed it on to their own children, who did the same. And now, centuries later, the rhyme still exists, not because it was important in any official sense, not because it was recorded in history books or preserved in archives, but because it was soft enough, simple enough, and memorable enough to survive the very thing it was describing. It outlasted the violence, it outlasted the fear, it outlasted the people who first whispered it and the people who first heard it whispered. And it remains, even now, a quiet reminder that some stories survive not because they are told clearly, but because they are told carefully. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? The question was never really about flowers, and the answer was never really about bells and shells. But we keep asking, and we keep answering, and the garden keeps growing.